Here we are discussing a topic that is very near and dear to my heart, and that is plagiarism. By the way, derived from a word for kidnapper. So when you plagiarize, you are kidnapping, taking somebody's baby. And my goal is to help you, yes, you, avoid plagiarism, even when you don't mean to do it, which is actually most often how it happens. So what counts as plagiarism? Plagiarism is any time you use any piece of others' words or ideas and do not give them full credit. So words or ideas, a quote's pretty clear, but you get a nice comparison of two things. You go, oh, it's a great way to compare those things, really sort of make it clear. Okay, well, you got that from somewhere. You should give them credit for it. So anytime you got something from someplace and you don't tell us where you got it, you're plagiarizing. Right? So anytime you don't tell us where you got your information from, okay? Any time. It doesn't matter if it's obvious to us that you had to learn that somewhere. You have got to tell us where you learned it. So what counts as plagiarism? There's some obvious things, right? You copy something right from a website, a book, an article, and everybody thinks it's yours. That's pretty obvious. You take a paragraph from a source and you think nobody's going to know it's not yours. You get your friend's speech, notes, materials, use them as your own. Yeah, all plagiarism. Use a quote from something you read without providing the source. Okay? That last one still seems sort of obvious, right? But also there are some things you end up overlooking. So we talk about you get a quote and you don't attribute it. You explain a process you read without telling the audience where you learned it. So you talk about the stages of development of a bug from larva to, I don't know, bigger, older bug, I don't actually know. You explain that process. Okay, so what book did you look at that told you that process? You know what I mean? Like it's a sort of major concept. Where'd you get it from? You use the author's example in your speech and you don't give them credit. I've actually called students out before on plagiarism for this because it said it compared a president to some football player from the 70s. And I was like, that's not yours. I went and looked it up and sure, no, it's not. I found it someplace. Right? So even the example that you're using, it's not yours. So tell us where the example came from. You found some statistics and you don't tell us where they came from. So, no, I know that when you tell me that 1 in 8 women in a lifetime develop breast cancer, I know you didn't make up that number, but I also need to know where it came from. By the way, I don't have the source off the top of my head for that, but I know I could find one, and if I used it in speech, you're darn right I would. And by the way, even as I say it, you say, well, is it still the number? You know, maybe I'm wrong. We don't really know. We can't double check it right now because why? I haven't given you a source. Right. Oh, and anytime you have like a diagram or an image that you find online and you use it, you don't tell us where you got it from, that's plagiarism, right? And I work very hard to let people know where my clips are from, the video clips that I use in my classes, where the images are from. You got to give credit for those things. So, is it plagiarism? Let's follow this little decision tree to determine whether or not something is plagiarism. You have a fact, example, statistic, quote, or an image in your speech. Did you invent it yourself, right? Is this fact something that you discovered? Example, one of your own, a statistic you found because you surveyed people, a quote, something you coined, an image you created yourself. Did you invent it yourself? Yes, you did. It is not plagiarism. Congratulations! Did you invent it? No. Will you use a complete citation to tell your audience where it came from? What? I need to do that every single time I say something? Oh, really? That's plagiarism. But you say, no, I will use a complete citation and tell you where it came from anytime I use a fact, example, statistic, quote, or image that's not mine. I'm going to use a citation. Great! It is not plagiarism. That's what it comes down to. If it wasn't yours, you gotta tell us where it came from, or in fact, it's plagiarism. So there are 3 elements to a citation. 3 elements to a citation. That's inspired by Arthur Christmas. Okay, the author is a person or persons, and it can be an organization. The Department of Defense, the CDC, right, which is the Centers for Disease Control, right? Those are authors, right? The title of the publication, I'll take the name of the book, the magazine, the newspaper, the journal. I'll take that as the title of publication. The name of a web page, right? The web page, that I will take that, and the date. And date can be when something was published or when you accessed an undated source. So you find something on the CDC website, right? Centers for Disease Control, their website, a fact sheet, there's not a date on it. I think they usually date their things. There's not a date on it. Then you would give us, and you would say, this information was last accessed on August, whatever, and that would be the date. So we'd know as of a certain date that was what was being made public and available. So the basic citation looks like this. According to the author in this publication on this date, whatever, right? So according to Michael Hanlon in the London Daily Telegraph on August 17, 2013, our solar system is home to a swarm of comets, rocks, boulders, and flying mountains, tens of thousands of which are big enough to wipe out anything from a small city to the entire biosphere. Oh, cheerful, right? But you see there, according to the author in this thing on this date, there it is. No big deal, right? You can switch it up. Title from date, author writes, right? So in the London Daily Telegraph from August 17th, 2013, Michael Hanlon writes, and then there it is, right? You just work it in, right? On in a date, the author, well, you'll see, right? On August 17th, 2013, Michael Hanlon wrote in the London Daily Telegraph, our solar system, yada, 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 right? Those three basic pieces of information. You must do it. Paraphrasing, right? So you don't use a quote, but you use your words to summarize someone else's work. Paraphrasing is fantastic. I'm a big fan of paraphrasing. I think you should generally paraphrase and not quote. Rarely is a quote necessary. Usually a paraphrase is preferred. But it requires a citation. Damn it. Pardon my French. Right? This is a common way to commit accidental plagiarism. Right? It's a common thing to do is you're just summarizing somebody's ideas and you forget to tell us where it came from. Right? It's, like I say, great to use in speeches. I don't want you to now be afraid of doing it. Just tell us. If there are three key things to remember about whatever it is, tell us. According to this author and written in this date, in this source, there's three key things to be aware of about whatever. You know? So some sources, as I said, they're by organizations. They're not as just an author or a single person or actual individuals we can name off, right? So examples of this would be the organization's webpage. So the Centers for Disease Control may not sign anything. A lot of U.S. departments, especially Department of Defense, does not usually give credit to individuals. This is a report from the Department of Defense, right? You may find a brochure or a pamphlet, like not like some little random leaflet, but you might find a fact sheet that's being handed out, and there's not it's not authored by an individual, but just by an organization because it's put out by some group, right? You still have to have a citation for it, right? You still have to do that. NASA, for instance, will produce lots of information about space things. There's no name on it, right? They have these pamphlets they put out about various projects. They don't have any individual names. You'd be citing this NASA, right? So you still give me the author, the title, and the date, right? You're still going to do it. So, for instance, whoever produced the content, like the Department of Education or WebMD, the title would be the name of the publication. It might be a web page name. Notice I didn't say WebMD, like the web page, not the website, right? Because WebMD would be the author. But if you say you found something on WebMD, there are like thousands of pages in WebMD. So it's like saying I found this in the dictionary. Well, I guess that'd be arranged alphabetically. But it's like say I found it on a bookshelf. Okay, which one? Right. So the web page name. So according to WebMD, and their fact sheet on prostate cancer. Okay. So now I can go to WebMD and put in their fact sheet on prostate cancer and find it, right? The pamphlet title, right? Whatever their pamphlet's being called, that would be the title of the publication. And the date would be the document's date if it's provided, perhaps a copyright date, right? It may just be the last updated It's on the web page. It'll say last updated on July 1st, 2019. That would count. As I said a moment ago, the copyright date on the brochure, that would also count. There's usually a copyright date on most things. So yeah, those be used the date. If the web page doesn't have a date, as I said, you tell us when you last saw the web page, right? Right. So samples for citing an organization's document, some samples. When a web page has a date. According to the Daily Galaxy, on their web page, a global extinction-sized asteroid sailed past Earth this week, last updated on May 26 of 2013. An asteroid that passed by our planet on May 31st was so large, if it impacted Earth, it would probably result in global extinction, right? But you notice there, according to this web page, the author is the Daily Galaxy, which is a website. On their web page, so I now know which one to go to, and then they have the last updated date, right? If it doesn't have a date, according to howstuffworks.com, right, and it's a big website, on the web page, what if an asteroid hit Earth? So I know which page within that site to go to, right? Last accessed on August 20th, 2013, and there it is, okay? A brochure, the NASA brochures, NASA's 2014 asteroid strategy from April 2010 reported, right, and there's a paraphrase there. So again, always the author, the source, and the date. Always. If you're going to use a source again, right, sometimes that same source gets used more than once. You have to cite it, but you still to do that, but you can give us just 2/3 of it. Just 2/3 of the citation. Author and date, author and title, date and title. You see what I'm saying here? Right. So originally you had said, according to Michael Hanlon in the London Daily Telegraph, August 17th, 2013. Author, source, date. Your second reference says, Michael Hanlon of the London Daily Telegraph also reported. So I just know, right, that it's going back that one from before. Okay. So you use a 2/3 citation. But every time you gotta tell me where the information came from. Well, sometimes sources use sources. Actually, most sources do use sources. But on occasion, the source will reference where they found information, and they may actually even quote that source, and you need to distinguish for us between what we call primary and secondary sources, right? So the source specifically says maybe they interviewed somebody, right? An interview with the secretary of whatever found, right? It may be that they, a newspaper article and it reports a statistic that was produced by another organization, right? It may even paraphrase. It may say that a conversation with the president of whatever company yielded whatever result or finding. Right? So you need to just be clear for us whether you read that original research or whether it's you reading it from the thing, or you getting that information from the thing that you read. So you need to be clear then where the idea came from. Whether you are the one who did the interview, whether you are the one who read the report with that statistic, right? Or if you read something that quoted the interview or used that statistic. You need to be clear about that. Again, we call it the difference between primary and secondary sources. So be sure that you cite the source that you used, right? What did you find? What were you using? Make sure you provide it. And you mention where they found their work, right? A good example is an article by Henry Fountain in the New York Times from March 21st, 2013 reported that Dr. James Green of NASA finds no asteroid being tracked currently poses a risk to our planet. Right? Do you hear that part? Right. So I know that you read the New York Times, an article by Henry Fountain from March of 2013. And that when you were reading that, you really learned something about what Dr. James Green said. I know that you did not talk to Dr. James Green, nor read anything that he wrote. So you're distinguishing for me between or you letting me know that this information from Dr. James Green is not from you, but from a secondary source. You're just clarifying that, right? Another good example, former astronaut Dr. Edward Liu was quoted in the New York Times from March 21st, 2013 by Henry Fountain as saying, right? Because you said former astronaut Dr. Edward Liu says, and then give me the quote, it's very confusing to me where that came from. It almost just that you spoke to the person, right? But instead, when you say the astronaut, Dr. Edward Lu, was quoted in the New York Times, right, on March 21st, 2013 by Henry Fountain as saying, and you give me the quote, I know that you found that quote somewhere else, right? That quote was, you're not lifting a quote from a piece, you're lifting a quote from a piece that quotes the quote, if that makes sense, right? So that the point is, we know where the example that you found, where it actually came from, right? And that it's a quote or information that these people are saying they got from somewhere else, and you're being very honest and open and clear about that. So that's what you're doing. That's how you avoid plagiarism.